would simply ignore the secret dossier that he has on me. But thankfully, this one has lesbians. I don't care if you're tired of getting surprise dinosaur erotica in your email inbox, all while her annoying ass younger sister wants the king to die. Raylo fanfiction commits higher academia ethics violations. Unfortunately, that same main character was a massive bitch. Dear Abby, my situationship with death has gotten pretty steamy. Who illegally gives her practice corpses? Get a job. Stay away from her. My American Marine bodyguard is secret European royalty? Also, the upside down is in the backyard, and somehow my dead mom is involved. Instead of her sister divorcing him, she could kill him instead. If this book has no haters, it is because I have passed away. Poisoning bad men brought them all together, and I just think that that's beautiful. This is the 4th time I've had to try to sit down and record this because my computer has just been not cooperating recording a second video today, because the first one was fine, unless I haven't looked close enough at the footage. Oh my god. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Gia. I am a 28-year-old lady who lives in my mom's basement, and today we're going to do something very fun, and I'm very excited to do this. The video I recorded earlier was actually my reading wrap-up and all of my statistics through 2023 and 2024, because I had such a bad reading year last year and I fell off so hard I never did any of the reading wrap-up stuff for 2023, so I hadn't talked about it. So I just put the two together. But I want you to imagine me early 2023, and I'm watching a YouTuber that is doing a kind of book reviews in a sentence type video where she reviewed every book that she read in the year previous in like a sentence or two. I'm a stage 5 yapper, so I can't exactly do a sentence or two. We're gonna do 30 seconds or less, and there's 92 books in this list. And like I said, this is the 4th time I've started to record this video. The first time I made it all the way through. The second time I made it about 30 minutes, and then the time after I made it about 5 minutes. I think I fixed it for now. Truly just me standing over my open PC case going, what's going on here? So how I went about this the first time is that I told you the title of the book, the author, what I said about it, and the star rating. But the first time I did that, it was an hour and 18 minutes of raw footage, and quite frankly, I can't be bothered. So I'm just gonna tell you what I said, and I'll do everything else in post. Now, most of these I did write in 2023. I will tell you when we get to the point where I wrote them yesterday. I did look through everything that I wrote in 2023, and I did cut maybe a little bit out if it was like super long, but otherwise I didn't really change anything because I wanted it to stay as true to what I would have said if I did this video a year ago when I should have done it. My thoughts may have changed, and I think a couple of my star ratings have changed. Also, there are some books on here that I have not publicly rated due to one reason or another, but I will tell you what I rated them. Anyway, like I said, there is 92 books, so let's get it started. More trigger warnings than characters, and the pacing is as slow as a real 4-year degree program, but it showcases the author's exemplary writing and stuffed all of my investment into the last quarter of the book. A huge improvement on its predecessor, and holds the title for the book review that has the most views on my channel. Includes multiple journeys to hell and all the friends we made along the way. It's a found family of fighting demons, including the ones in your head. A story that could have easily been 2, a Hunger Games look-alike, and an intricate discussion about classism, privilege, and revolution. Unfortunately, I wanted more of the second story, which maybe I will see if I choose to pick up the second installment, which is already out. I'm just slow. An action-packed end to the main story, and too many. The story could end here and feel complete, but it did suffer from Return of the King syndrome towards the end because there were 3 back-to-back major battles, and I thought the book was dragging at about 30%, but I think at the time I was just depressed. Every series has its weakest link, and this is Vampire Academies. There's too much revisiting of the first arc of the series, too many mental gymnastics between Lissa and Rose. I did not quite care for the kidnapping and the dubious consent. The plot points themselves are not super terrible, but I felt like there were 2 different books happening at the same time, and it felt like it could have been solved by doing, Rose on her own and then all the antics happening at school. But I understand that the point was that Lissa and Rose were supposed to be separated, and that's why there was, so much conflict, but whatever. This is an improvement. It picks up on the plot and pace from the last book, gives us higher stakes. I found lots of amazing emotional intelligence from several characters. Also, I love Adrian. This is a very fun, emotional, steamy, and dreamy romance between the grumpy sunshine trope. And coming from a cod or a child of Disney myself, this series was kind of made for me. I was extremely invested in the creative ideas that were tossed around about making the park better, which made me want to binge the entire series, and I did. I'm also a massive fan of Defunct Land, if that tells you anything. I'm only docking some points due to the fact that there was a major power imbalance, but there wasn't any forbiddenness about the couple being together. At least it didn't feel like it. Like, there was definitely a power imbalance, but it's not like you were supposed to get the impression that they weren't supposed to be together. It was just a power imbalance, and I felt like that was kind of missing. This was a great ending to the Vampire Academy series. It focused heavily on a mystery plot that, while I remembered the who and who done it, I didn't quite remember the how or why, so it felt like I was getting a fresh perspective on an old favorite. And I only had one very specific gripe about the secluded religious community and their traditions. Other than that, it wraps it up really well, and it introduces us to the protagonist in the next series, Sydney. This is the sequel to The Fine Print, in which it's between the older brother who has to get married in order to become CEO of the company and his assistant who he marries for a convenience marriage. And I didn't really like it because there was a 13-year age gap, and while that would have been fine, I really felt like the power imbalance was too strong here, and I really didn't like it. And I thought that Iris was really dragged through the mud, and I didn't like it. I understand that it could hit for somebody else, but not for me. I read the Inheritance Games in 2022, so this was when I read the Hawthorne Legacy, and I thought it was better than the Inheritance Games. It had way more intense games and puzzles, and I really like it when, you know, you find a clue and it leads you to another clue and it leads you to another clue, and it's like you're not quite sure when the puzzle is over because you just keep getting clues after clues. Like, I kind of like that. That's something that I really like about mysteries, is that there are codes and puzzles and that kind of thing. I didn't know where the series is going. Like, who's the villain? Are they cousins? Is this getting weird? And my only complaint is that I genuinely don't know the difference between the two brothers that I'm supposed to care about as love interests. This is the best one out of the series. It's childhood friends to lovers to exes to second chance romance. And if you know me, you know that second chance romance is one of my favorite romance tropes. And if you disagree, argue with the wall. I will not take any criticism at this time. And I really love this. It made me tear up a little bit. And when a romance can make me tear up, it gets a really high rating. I found out afterwards that this is kind of a side series to these Violent Delights, but anyway, this is a historical fantasy that chronicles a semi-cold but brewing civil conflict between the nationalists and the communists in 1920s China, and our main character is a immortal assassin who has to figure out her role in preventing all of this. Excellent queer rep, lots of spying and espionage, lots of falling in love with your fake husband. If you thought that in 2025 I would shut the fuck up about Olivia Blake, you would be wrong. Olivia Blake writes in purple prose, and I honestly can't blame people if they think it's pretentious or boring or if they can't get into it. Like, I'm not going to argue with you about it. It's just a matter of taste. Anyways, this is a multi-perspective story that chronicles the relationships of 6 people, and they all have to figure out which one of them they're going to end up killing in order for the rest of them to, like, magically transcend. This is more of a story about the relationships between people, and instead of people experiencing plot, it's people experiencing people. So I can understand why a lot of people don't like this, but I do. I love this book so much, I bought a copy. It is as close to finding a novel that talks about my scholarly interests that I've ever found, which is historical archaeology. And it's really just a multi-perspective story detailing the lives of 3 women, 2 women in the past and 1 in the future, who's uncovering the past. And it's all about how poisoning bad men brought them all together. And I just think that that's beautiful. I understand why this novella exists, but that doesn't mean that I agree with it existing. Sarah Janet just wrote her own fan fiction to do an ACOTAR Christmas, and it accomplished 2 things. It set up the romances for future books, Cassian and Nessa in A Court of Silver Flames, and Elaine, Lucian, and Azriel in ACOTAR 5. And then the only thing, other than that I found worthwhile is that there was an actual conversation between Rhysand and Feyre about whether or not they're ready to try to have a child, because the surprise pregnancy trope is so hated by so many people. I found this conversation to be extremely refreshing, and I was honestly surprised to find it in ACOTAR Christmas, because if I would think of any popular book series that has a surprise pregnancy, I would think that ACOTAR would maybe have that, but I was pleasantly surprised. You will never see me shut the fuck up about this series. I'm actually rereading this book right now so I can read the last book. So I'm doing book 1, book 2, and book 3. Anyway, this is a second chance love story about grief and redemption between 2 former first loves, Emmeline and Crown Prince Rainier, as they go and try and rescue Emmeline's daughter from a rival kingdom. This book is very long. It's like 800 pages. And if you're experiencing any sort of relationship grief right now, I would maybe steer clear or steer towards, depending on what type of person you are. But this book made me cry and miss my ex-boyfriend. Do with that with what you will. The best way I could describe this is Monster Hunter meets Silent Hill, but I wanted so much more for this book than what was given to me. I really thought that the concept itself was interesting, and I'm really enjoying like YA's foray into more horror elements, but I felt like it could have been aged up. Like, it was a very specific feeling I had where I said, you know what, I kind of want this to be more mature, more dark, more gritty, more horror. That's what I wanted from it, and I didn't get that. I may consider the sequel. This is another book that I will describe by comparing two things to each other. I say that this is like Midsummer and Lord of the Flies because our main character has grown up in a very restrictive community that exhibits very clear cult-like behaviors because they're worshiping and making sacrifices to a literal like sentient forest that's really bloodthirsty and will like kill you if you don't make sacrifices to it. Anyway, so the main love interest serves as the person in her life that is helping to deconstruct her upbringing and show her what the outside world is really like. And honestly, I think that this should be taught in high school classrooms. I feel like I don't have to talk about this very much, but I found the Grisha really interesting, and how their powers were all like ranked up against each other I found to be really interesting. And I will give the story props for giving us lots of learning scenes. Can immortal men stay away from teenage girls, please? I was truly here for the vibes, and the vibes did not disappoint at all, but I honestly expected more smut. I think that'll be in later books, but I honestly expected more smut in book 1. I reread The Cruel Prince because I was trying to finish the rest of the series. I didn't, just to be clear. I still have not read the other two. One thing I really like about Holly Black is that she does an excellent job crafting characters and side characters to be all different from each other as far as how they look. You know, who has scales, who has tails, other than Carden, who has horns, who has thorns, you know, all of those things. I think that Holly Black does a really good job at making every side character feel individual and unique. I had my gripes about Sydney because she was giving mid-2000s pick me, but other than that, the story itself was pretty well crafted, and I didn't not expect who the bad guy was, but how the dots were all connected was unexpected. If this book has no haters, it is because I have passed away, but at the time of reading it, I couldn't stop seeing elements from Mockingjay and Divergent, and then later seeing it being compared to Red Rising. I said I could be convinced to continue the story because I already owned the second book, but honestly, this author is one of my ops because I've wanted to root for her so badly, but everything I've ever read by her has been a massive disappointment. Sirens and pirates. This is a Little Mermaid retelling, and it was amazing. So I was drawn to this because it focused on sirens, and it portrayed mermaids as different from sirens, but that mermaids were also annoyances. I found that to be really interesting. I did not want this story to end. I actually wanted there to be a sequel, and there's not. Last I checked. I have to be honest, I pride myself on being a pretty smart person who knows a little about a lot and a lot about a little, if that makes sense. However, I wish I knew more about Hungarian history and Jewish mythology before I went into reading this book, because I felt like I was not prepared to understand all the references, and I felt like the inspired material went over my head, but it did inspire me to, add that to the Rolodex of things that I'd like to research in the future, something I'd like to learn about. This is what I can best describe as a seaside retreat as prescribed by a Victorian doctor. I could practically smell the salt as I was reading this book. It is a breath of fresh air, and it focused less on mythology and more on character relationships. Yo ho, a pirate's life for me. A murder mystery that leads to a centuries-old magical conspiracy, and it all takes place in libraries. Are you joking? I could not be more seated. This is a fantastical take on the Russian Revolution, mixing history, mythology, and magic. I thought that it was very well constructed. However, the narration was a little bit difficult for me to get through, and I think that the best thing about this book was the inclusion and exploration of queer relationships. This is a Beauty and the Beast inspiration, but not a retelling. And the most interesting part of this is the main character, Violet, who embodies the seer character in a fresher way because she's less whimsical and more like feels entrapped by her abilities because she's reading the same palms, reading the same tea leaves every day, and then the king is trying to get her to lie to the people all the time to convince them that everything's okay all the time when it's not. Also, she wants to kiss the prince really bad. So, we've all been there. I genuinely believe that this was inspired by The Bachelor Vietnam. It's about a reality show in which one guy's ex-girlfriends all come back together and live in the same house, and then they all get a second chance at dating him until he picks which ex-girlfriend he wants to redate. So it's a story of two women who dated the same man and they fall in love with each other instead, and then they convince all the other women in the house that he sucks. I read Anna Huang in 2023, I read Anna Huang in 2024, and I will be reading Anna Huang in 2025. Anyway, the first book I read by her was King of Wrath. I found that this was interesting because it was like mafia-esque romance between two rich people. Oh my god, this was so refreshing, and not just man rich, woman poor. And there was like a new money and an old money dynamic going on that I was invested in, not just the characters but also their backstories and them falling in love all at the same time. I liked this less than the Hawthorne Legacy by a little bit, but it was still very well written and it was still very well executed, and I was still legitimately shocked at the way it ended. So it was still good. This is a literary masterpiece that exemplifies a crash course in anthropological theory, the history of linguistics, and how the lens of Western expansion has exploited and pillaged the entire world of its culture, resources, peoples, languages, and perspectives. This book should horrify you. And it should make you look at the world differently. And I think it should be read in college classrooms. I want this book to become a movie. It's about a very secretive and enigmatic wife who made her husband promise not to ask her any questions. But then once literal graves start to get dug up, he's forced to start asking them. And then looking at all of the mess that it leaves behind. This is for every younger sister who hates her brother-in-law and wishes that instead of her sister divorcing him, she could kill him instead. Also, there's a demon chicken familiar. You go kill that man. Oh my god, I really don't want to revisit my mistakes like this. This book is extremely silly. The world building is questionable and the line delivery is stiff at best, but I thought it was fun. I thought it was silly. I thought it was goofy. It wasn't fairies. It wasn't vampires. It was different. And if I'm being honest, I really didn't think that it would get this popular, but I did read somewhere that someone said once that Fourth Wing was as introductory to fantasy as ACOTAR. And for that, I think that it being accessible fantasy to people, even though I hate to say it like that, I think that it does have its place, but unfortunately that place is underneath my shoe. The best thing going for this story for me was the commentary on how human pollution was affecting the Fae world by polluting it too, and how technological waste was causing the rise of a new Fae. That I found extremely interesting, but other than that, this falls into the category of this is too juvenile for me now, but I would have eaten this shit up when I was 16. I found it to be really interesting for a woman who is cursed to not be remembered to favor the company of artists so that her existence is remembered through art as an anonymous muse. But can I please have an opinion on civil rights or gay rights from you, Addie LaRue? That's all I want to know. That's what I left the book with. This story might be genius because it's a love story about a half yokai falling for a prince and becoming his empress through like a Hunger Games-esque type of tournament. But as the story goes on, it kind of tells you how the characters that you're reading about are actually characters in a myth, and there's not a happy ending. I'm just letting you know now. 5 people sit in a Socratic circle, all while talking really condescending to each other, while they all individually and behind everybody's back try to figure out where their 6th person went, but they're pretending not to care because one of them was supposed to die anyway. But the thing is that they do care. There were very heavy scenes in this that were depicting kidnapping and the consequences of torture and capture on the individual psyche and on relationships. So this was a very gentle and thorough exploration of PTSD, psychological healing, and how we can make our relationships feel safe again. It also made me cry. A girl with death powers solves a murder mystery by contacting ghosts, and her sidekick is canonical death. And also, they have a crush on each other. This is also a murder mystery by contacting ghosts, but it is done poorly and with bad sapphic representation to make it worse. This one felt personal. This is also solving a murder mystery, but by decoding fluorographical puzzles. And this unlocked a new hyperfixation for me. Normal New York City girl wakes up in a magical dimension where she killed the king and queen, except she didn't. Her doppelganger did. So now she, under duress and under capture, has to pretend that she is her doppelganger with amnesia, as she is trying not to alert everybody around her that she is a completely different person. Also, in this universe, she is engaged to a really hot prince, and also they're vampires. A librarian with vague powers and a war veteran solve an art heist. The hero was as bland as untoasted white bread, and I was supposed to believe that he had fought on the front lines and he was this big hero, but he got almost kidnapped several times. Also, the magic system was really dumb. If you watched the TV series, this will just feel like deja vu. Imagine this. You are the world's top paid supermodel and your actress sister is engaged to your best friend, who is the son of a media mogul, and they are in an arranged engagement so that they can get married and combine the two families. But then your sister gets cold feet and you have to step into the arrangement so your family doesn't go bankrupt. This was basically a telenovela, and it was very silly, and I loved it. This is cozy fantasy at its finest, and I did like the inclusion of having children protagonists, but I didn't quite like that they were violent. Like a lot. All the time. Oh my god, I need to take deep breaths. Oh my god. Okay, so one of my biggest reading disappointments I have ever faced in my entire life. I legitimately think that this book could be completely rewritten by me in a much more interesting way and without any of the whimsy involved. Some people love this book. Some people hate this book. Mostly because of how Nesta's PTSD is portrayed in this book, but I think it's fine. But what I really liked about it was all of the Girl Squad sequences and the progression of Nessa and Cassian's relationship. Also, it's a long one. Like, it's really, really long. It's like 800 pages. Jesus Christ. This is a silly one because I was supposed to believe that the same book had both an insta-love trope and a touch her and you'll die trope. The rest of the books in the series are better, but this one was definitely inspired by 50 Shades of Grey. A feminist retelling, I know, sorry, jump scare, of the Trojan War from the perspectives of 3 women who are not Helen. She's just a secondary character. So I thought that this really brought to life women who were in the background of this conflict and put them first, crafting a commentary on the consequences of war, at least between the nobility, and how one woman's deceit gave a group of men the excuse to enact violence against a rival kingdom for their own personal gain, and that Helen was not quite the fodder, but the starter in that fire. A rare instance of an autistic primary character that is done well. There's a major fantastical turn at the 50% mark, and I really like that the book was crafted as an ethnographical research account, and the narration really stayed true to that even though it turned fantastical, the narrative pattern stayed the same. It is at this point going forward where everything I have read after this point was written yesterday. This will be unhinged and probably very rapid fire. Non-verbal protagonist who is the only person who could see the ghosts and the ghouls, but also the upside down is in the backyard and somehow my dead mom is involved. Magical system that is based on colors with corresponding powers. So our main character is a red witch in hiding who has to team up with a hot prince to overthrow an evil king and avenge her dead family. Also, someone has a secret fae identity. This is a horror adaptation of the 12 Dancing Princesses in which 12 sisters are cursed to die one by one in increasingly horrible ways, and our main character is more of an unreliable narrator that's experiencing a slow descent into madness as she's trying to figure out this mystery and solve it until she realizes that the entire process has just been a giant neon sign that says "You're next." This is princess and bodyguard romance, but wait. What's this? My American Marine bodyguard is secret European royalty? Get in my Kindle Unlimited loans. The youngest child of a royal fae family experiences middle child syndrome and must work odd jobs for the fae 1%. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. This is Cruel Prince fanfiction with fated mates. Alina spends the entire book on the run with Mal and then sacrifices herself in the end anyways. Get a job! Stay away from her! Now this is girl boss feminism literature because it really begs the question, what if Julia Child borderline hated her child and created feminism? Victorian girl genius gets kicked out of medical school, befriends a cute gravedigger who illegally gives her practice corpses and solves a mystery. Dear Abby, my situationship with death has gotten pretty steamy. My uncle is in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and I fear that interviewing ghosts may be the only method of investigation that we have, but also I think my cousin may be magical. This is based on the real-life event called the Sokol Affair. It's very interesting, but anyway, this is 2 physicists from different subfields who are arguing about which is more valid until they kiss. This book may be about physics, but it changed my brain chemistry. This book had everything going for it except for proper execution, and I wanted to love it so goddamn badly because you had a disabled protagonist with an empath love interest with interesting potential for world building, but unfortunately, that same main character was a massive bitch and the world building was only about 60% fleshed out. So I'm disappointed. I'm depressed. I wanted this to be a 5 stars for me. My best friend and my brother really sure do hate each other. I'm sure there's nothing else going on. Feminist retelling sorry for the jump scare, of The Legend of Circe, which was very interesting if you're into mythical retellings that change the perspective instead of the plot. But I fear that in a book between Circe and her own thoughts, she does not pass her own Bechdel test. Protagonist has a chance encounter with a fairy who literally takes half her soul, and now she must somehow live normally. The result of this is an allegory for neurodivergence and how to find love while feeling so different from others and being unsure why. This was really cute. Raylo fanfiction commits higher academia ethics violations, but at least the characters are of age. Inspired by ancient Egypt and ancient Sumeria, an eldest daughter must stand in for her father as a royal healer and find out, is the king really dying or is he being poisoned? All while her annoying-ass younger sister wants the king to die so that she can go with him as his queen into the afterlife. Buddy cop urban fantasy with way too many characters. Honestly, this could have been explained to me better if there was an omnipotent journalism perspective, almost like Lady Whistledown, but not, where it's explained to me in like as it's being reported on in a newspaper, and then the narrative voice then challenges the newspaper later. Like I felt like I needed graphs. I felt like I needed documents as to understand how this government worked because I was truly lost. This is a spin on I didn't know I had powers or the Born Sexy Yesterday to put a finger down if I didn't know that my powers were so rare, and now I'm accidentally important in a quest to destroy an enemy kingdom, all because my brother stole some shit from the wrong people, and I took the fall for him. But also, the king that I'm now contractually obligated to work for is really hot. An introspective into the life of a fictional silver screen... Fictional silver screen... I did it again. An introspective into the life of a fictional silver screen queen who had to change everything about herself in order to succeed, including whitewashing her identity and burying her gayness, and still, she is most famously remembered for the number of husbands that she had. Yassified Avatar The Last Airbender with a love interest that tries to kill you to force your powers into manifesting, but what you're called, which is a windwalker, is the same as the spec in World of Warcraft, and now you've completely lost me and I was never going to take you seriously. I don't care if you're tired of getting surprise dinosaur erotica in your email inbox. I'm going to keep sending it to you at the cost of my browser history and search algorithms until you give up and admit that you were wrong for doubting me and my client who wrote a bestseller about an old man's dead dog. This is also a story about two sisters, with the eldest one, of course, doing all the work. A historical fantasy with archaeology combined with a soft magic system that focuses more on empathy and emotions. The protagonist wants to know what happened to her parents after they went missing in Egypt, and she gets more than she bargained for. This was very interesting and fun. However, the love interest was an Englishman. Why the fuck is Danica still here, and why the fuck am I supposed to care? Cozy fantasy may be for you, but it isn't for me. However, I did appreciate the idea of what happens when the adventure is over and how do heroes spend their time outside of being in danger. Rich man believes that the bartender loves him, and he might be right. But what's most important is that I loved him. A girl with death powers and who is an illegal poison runner in a world inspired by the French catacombs is conscripted by a league of warrior monks to solve a vast conspiracy. Once again, I must admit that cozy fantasy is not for me, but thankfully this one has lesbians. I think the people who theorize that Rebecca Yarros uses AI to write her books might be onto something, because how else do you explain that a romantasy with a modern military and dragons is suddenly a sci-fi novel? I know I said I wasn't going to read Onyx Storm, but it is being released on my birthday, and putting out a video entitled Rebecca Yarros Ruined My Birthday might be too tempting for me to not make. Hogwarts, but make it Shadowhunters, and I mean this as an insult. If a series of short stories was written by Stephen King playing Mad Libs, aka most of the shit that he was writing while on coke in the 80s. Help! Draco Malfoy is an immortal trickster god who's obsessed with doing my bidding and reminding me of how much I owe him. Maybe a kiss and some sloppy toppy will settle the score? Well, we finally found our sixth, and it only took hopping timelines several times. Don't pay attention to the fact that getting the power to do so involves purposely detonating an atomic bomb. Also, the ending is going to piss you off. Like, the ending's really going to piss you off. Like, I'm sorry, like, spoilers. This has all been spoilers. But the entire thing was just an elaborate daydream in Libby's head. And so none of it ever happened. And I was really pissed, but also really impressed. I know this is Red Queen fan fiction, but I don't care because I liked it more than Red Queen, so just this once, any accusations of plagiarism are excused. This sequel raises several important questions. For example, after you've saved China and the world, and after you've discovered your origins and why you're immortal and why you decided to become an assassin who's also immortal, and after you've fallen in love with your fake husband, do you want to be a normal person? Or is that impossible? If I was so hot that a rich cybersecurity billionaire who was secretly in love with me wanted to give me cheap rent, I would simply ignore the secret dossier that he has on me, even though it unnerves me because I had a stalker once. If a Hallmark movie about a social media firebrand and a hot small-town groundskeeper began with a vignette about how the reason they knew each other previously was by a pure happenstance weekend of sex followed by an emotional situationship and commitment issues, and unironically, hysterical romance between a curse breaker who has never broken a curse and a disgraced Nepo baby in the field of archaeology, as they must, under very specific circumstances, with several elaborate steps involved, ceremoniously fuck to lift a curse so that a castle can grow a very specific kind of blue flower that grows nowhere else, and they must do it several times just to make sure that it worked. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 17 years old, and until a few months ago, I was just a demigod whose existence was mandated illegal, but who's made up for it several times by saving the world repeatedly, despite enduring innumerable ambiguous prophecies that could have also predicted that I destroyed the world instead. And now, to make matters worse, I have to complete near impossible chores for immortal gods in order to earn recommendation letters for college. If the trials of Hercules were given to Percy to get into college, and he only complains about it just a little bit. Have we all made it? Oh my god, I think I'm dying. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm tired of my yapping. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you'd like to find me anywhere else, you could find me on Twitter. That's the only place you can find me. Please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you like what you see here. And just to make sure that you made it to the end of this video, just to test you, make sure you leave a comment that says, "Happy birthday." Because in actuality, today is Sunday, and my birthday is on Tuesday. So when I said I was a 28-year-old lady in the intro to this video, it's because by the time this video comes out, I will be 28. Oh my god, I just remembered that I have an outro to these videos and I haven't recorded it in anything up until now. Remember to drink water, even if you put cherry liquid IV in it like I do. And be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything that you do. And I will see everybody in the next video. Bye.